Emma Rodriguez stared at the envelope in her hands, turning it over for the third time in as many minutes. There was no return address, no postmark she could decipher clearly, and her name and address were written in handwriting that looked disturbingly familiar. The letter had been sitting in her mailbox when she dragged herself home from another unsuccessful job interview, and something about it had made her hesitate before opening it. At 29 years old, Emma felt like her life was falling apart in slow motion. She had been laid off from her marketing job 6 months earlier, when the startup she worked for ran out of funding, and despite sending out hundreds of resumes, she couldn't seem to land even an interview, let alone a new position. Her savings were nearly depleted. She was 2 months behind on rent, and her relationship with her longtime boyfriend Jake had been deteriorating under the stress of her unemployment and growing depression. The worst part wasn't the financial pressure or even professional rejection. It was a growing sense that she had somehow gotten her life completely wrong, that every major decision she had made over the past decade had led her to this dead end where she felt trapped and hopeless about the future. Emma had been avoiding opening her mail for weeks, afraid of finding more bills she couldn't pay or notices she couldn't handle. But something about this particular envelope compelled her attention in a way that made her stomach clench with nervous anticipation. She finally tore open the envelope while standing in her small apartment's kitchen, and what she found inside made her sink into one of the mismatched chairs around her tiny dining table. The letter was written on plain white paper in handwriting that was unmistakably her own, but somehow different, more confident, more mature, with subtle changes in the way certain letters were formed that suggested years of evolution in the writer's hand. "Dear Emma," the letter began, "I know this will seem impossible, but I am writing to you from 16 years in the future. Today is March 15th, 2040, and I am 45 years old. I know you're going to think this is a joke or that you're having some kind of breakdown, but please read this entire letter before you decide what to believe." Emma's first instinct was to crumple up the letter and throw it away. Obviously, someone was playing an elaborate prank on her, though she couldn't imagine who would go to such lengths or how they had managed to replicate her handwriting so perfectly. But something about the tone of the writing, the way the sentences flowed with her own internal voice, made her continue reading despite her skepticism. "Right now, you're sitting in the kitchen of your apartment on Maple Street," the letter continued, "and you're wearing the gray sweater with the small hole in the left sleeve that you've been meaning to fix for months. You came home from an interview at Henderson Marketing today, and you think it went badly because the interviewer seemed distracted and ended the meeting 15 minutes early." Emma looked down at her gray sweater, her eyes immediately finding the small hole in the left sleeve that she had indeed been meaning to repair for months. The interview at Henderson Marketing had ended exactly as described, with the interviewer, Mrs. Patterson, seeming preoccupied and cutting their meeting short. The specific details were accurate enough to make Emma feel dizzy with confusion and fear. "I need you to listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you," the letter went on, "because the decisions you make in the next 3 weeks will determine whether you live the life I'm living now, or whether you make the mistakes that cost me years of happiness and opportunities that can never be recovered." The letter went on to describe specific events that would happen over the following weeks, along with advice about how Emma should respond to each situation. According to her supposed future self, she would receive a call on Friday from Henderson Marketing offering her the job she had interviewed for that day, despite her impression that the interview had gone poorly. The letter urged her to accept the position, even though the salary was lower than what she had been hoping for. More specifically, the letter warned her about Jake, her boyfriend of 2 years. According to the future Emma, Jake was planning to propose to her next weekend during what he had told her would be a casual dinner at their favorite restaurant. The letter contained intimate details about their relationship that no outsider could have known, including the exact wording of arguments they had had in private and Jake's habit of unconsciously tapping his fingers when he was nervous about bringing up serious topics. "Jake is a good man," the letter acknowledged, "but he's not the right man for you. If you marry him, you'll spend 8 years in a marriage that becomes increasingly unsatisfying for both of you before you finally divorce. You will waste your late 20s and early 30s in a relationship that prevents you from becoming the person you're meant to be. More importantly, saying yes to Jake means saying no to David Chun, who you'll meet next month if you take the Henderson Marketing job." The letter provided a detailed description of David Chun, a graphic designer, who would be working on a project with Henderson Marketing in April, whom Emma would supposedly meet during a client presentation. According to the future Emma, David would become not just her husband, but her business partner in a successful design firm that would start together, and the father of the 2 children she was apparently destined to have. But the letter's most specific and disturbing prediction concerned Emma's mother, who lived 3 hours away in Sacramento. According to the future Emma, her mother would be diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer in 2 weeks, but would delay treatment because she didn't want to worry Emma during her job search difficulties. The letter urged Emma to call her mother that very evening and insist on a conversation about health and medical checkups, because early intervention would be crucial for her mother's long-term survival. Emma stared at the letter for nearly an hour, reading and rereading each paragraph while trying to make sense of what she was experiencing. The rational part of her mind insisted that the letter had to be fake. Time travel was impossible, and there were logical explanations for everything the letter described. Someone who knew her well could have observed the details about her apartment and her clothing. The information about Jake could have come from mutual friends or from someone who had overheard their conversations. Even the prediction about her mother could be a cruel guess based on family medical history. But the letter contained details that seemed impossible for anyone else to know. It mentioned a recurring dream Emma had been having about flying over her childhood neighborhood, a dream she had never described to anyone. It referenced her secret habit of talking to herself in different voices when she was alone, something she had never admitted to even her closest friends. Most convincingly, the handwriting looked exactly like her own, but with subtle changes that suggested natural evolution over time rather than attempted forgery. If this story truly touches your heart, let it speak for you. Like this video, subscribe to be part of our journey, and share your feelings in the comments. Emma decided to test the letter's predictions, starting with the easiest one to verify. She called her mother that evening, something she had been avoiding for weeks because she didn't want to admit how badly her job search was going. "Mom," Emma said when her mother answered the phone, "when was the last time you had a mammogram?" The question surprised her mother, who explained that she had been putting off her annual mammogram because she had been busy with work and didn't want to take time off for medical appointments. After some gentle pressure from Emma, her mother agreed to schedule the appointment for the following week. On Friday, exactly as the letter had predicted, Emma received a call from Henderson Marketing offering her the job. Mrs. Patterson apologized for seeming distracted during the interview, explaining that she had been dealing with a family emergency but had been impressed by Emma's qualifications and presentation. The salary offer was exactly what the letter had specified, and Emma accepted the position despite her lingering reservations about the company. The following weekend, Jake took Emma to their favorite Italian restaurant for what he had described as a casual dinner. Halfway through the meal, Emma noticed him unconsciously tapping his fingers against the table, exactly as the letter had described. When he excused himself to go to the bathroom, Emma saw him speaking quietly with their waiter, and when he returned to the table, he seemed more nervous than she had ever seen him. During dessert, Jake got down on one knee beside their table and proposed a ring he had apparently arranged to have hidden in Emma's tiramisu. The proposal was sweet and heartfelt, and under normal circumstances, Emma would have been thrilled. Jake was a kind, stable man who loved her deeply, and they had discussed marriage many times over the past year. But the letter's warnings echoed in Emma's mind as Jake waited for her answer. According to her supposed future self, saying yes to this proposal would lead to 8 years of increasing dissatisfaction and eventual divorce. More than that, it would prevent her from meeting David Chun and building the life she was supposedly meant to live. Emma's response surprised everyone in the restaurant, including herself. Instead of giving Jake an immediate answer, she asked if they could talk about the proposal privately at home. The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of Emma's life, as she tried to explain her sudden doubts about their relationship without revealing the existence of the letter that had influenced her thinking. Jake was hurt and confused by Emma's hesitation, especially since they had been planning to move in together and had talked about marriage as an inevitable next step in their relationship. But as they talked through the night, Emma realized that the letter had forced her to confront doubts about their compatibility that she had been suppressing for months. She and Jake wanted different things from life in ways that had become more apparent as their relationship matured. Jake was content with stable employment and predictable routines, while Emma had dreams of entrepreneurship and creative projects that he didn't understand or support. Jake wanted to buy a house in the suburbs and start a family immediately, while Emma felt unprepared for those commitments and uncertain about whether she wanted children at all. The letter hadn't created these incompatibilities. It had simply forced Emma to acknowledge them honestly for the first time. After 3 days of difficult conversations, Emma and Jake agreed to end their relationship, a decision that was painful for both of them, but that felt more authentic than continuing to ignore their fundamental differences. 2 weeks later, Emma received a phone call from her mother that made her blood run cold. The mammogram her mother had reluctantly scheduled had revealed early-stage breast cancer, exactly as the letter had predicted. The oncologist was optimistic about treatment options because the cancer had been caught early, but he emphasized that delays in diagnosis and treatment could have led to much more serious complications. Emma's mother later told her that she had been experiencing symptoms for several months, but had been avoiding medical attention because she didn't want to add to Emma's stress during her job search. If Emma hadn't insisted on the mammogram appointment, her mother might have delayed diagnosis until the cancer had progressed beyond the early, treatable stage. The accuracy of the prediction shook Emma in ways that the other verifications had not. It was possible to imagine that someone might have made lucky guesses about her job interview or Jake's proposal plans, but predicting her mother's medical diagnosis seemed to require knowledge that no living person could possess. Emma started her new job at Henderson Marketing with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She had taken the position primarily because the letter had urged her to, rather than because she was particularly enthusiastic about the company or the role. But she found herself enjoying the work more than she had expected, and her colleagues seemed impressed by her ideas and creativity. In early April, exactly as the letter had predicted, Henderson Marketing began working with an outside design firm on a major rebranding project for one of their biggest clients. The lead designer on the project was a man named David Chun, who matched the letter's description in every detail Emma could verify. David was in his early 30s, had dark hair and an easy smile, and possessed the kind of quiet confidence that Emma had always found attractive. He was passionate about design in ways that reminded Emma of her own creative interests, and their professional collaboration quickly evolved into personal conversations during coffee breaks and lunch meetings. But Emma found herself in an impossible position. She was genuinely attracted to David and enjoyed their growing friendship, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was following a script written by her future self rather than making authentic choices based on her own feelings and desires. The letter had predicted that she and David would begin dating in May, get engaged after 18 months, and married 2 years later. It described their future children in detail, a daughter named Sophia and a son named Marcus, and provided specific information about the design business they would supposedly start together. Emma struggled with the ethical implications of what she was experiencing. If the letter was somehow legitimate, was she obligated to follow its guidance, even if it meant manipulating David into a relationship he might not otherwise pursue? If the letter was fake, would she allow herself to be manipulated into making major life decisions based on elaborate lies? The dilemma became more complex as Emma's relationship with David developed naturally in ways that matched the letter's predictions. Their professional collaboration led to personal friendship, which led to romantic attraction that seemed genuine and mutual. David asked Emma out for their first official date in mid-May, exactly as the letter had specified, but the invitation came in response to what appeared to be authentic emotional connection rather than manipulation on Emma's part. As spring turned into summer, Emma found herself living a life that felt both predetermined and authentically chosen. Her relationship with David was developing exactly as the letter had described, but it also felt natural and right in ways that her relationship with Jake never had. Her job at Henderson Marketing was leading to creative opportunities and professional recognition that gave her confidence she hadn't felt in years. Most importantly, her mother's early cancer treatment was successful, and doctors were optimistic about her long-term prognosis. Emma realized that without the letter's warning, her mother might have delayed diagnosis until the cancer had progressed beyond effective treatment, a possibility that made Emma grateful for mysterious intervention regardless of its origin. By late summer, Emma had to acknowledge that her life was improving in dramatic ways that correlated exactly with the advice she had received from her supposed future self. She had a job she enjoyed, a relationship that felt genuinely fulfilling, and the security of knowing that her mother's health crisis was being addressed effectively. But the letter had also warned Emma about challenges that lay ahead. According to her future self, she would face a major professional decision in September when Henderson Marketing offered her a promotion that would require relocating to their New York office. The letter advised her to decline the promotion and instead use her savings to start the freelance design business that would eventually become the successful firm she and David would run together. When the New York promotion was offered in mid-September, exactly as predicted, Emma found herself facing the same dilemma that had characterized her entire experience with the letter. Should she follow the guidance of her supposed future self, even though it meant turning down a significant career opportunity? Or should she make her own decisions based on her current understanding of her goals and priorities? Emma decided to test the letter's guidance by discussing the promotion opportunity with David, without revealing the specific advice she had received about declining it. David's response was illuminating. He expressed concern that the New York position would interfere with the creative projects Emma had been developing, and he suggested that she might be happier pursuing independent work that would allow her more creative control. David's unsolicited advice matched the letter's guidance exactly, but also reflected genuine understanding of Emma's professional interests and personality. Emma realized that whether or not the letter was legitimate, the guidance it provided was leading her toward decisions that aligned with her authentic preferences and goals. Emma declined the New York promotion and used her savings to establish a freelance design practice, exactly as the letter had advised. Within 6 months, her business was profitable enough to support her full-time, and she had attracted several high-profile clients who appreciated her creative approach and professional reliability. David left his position at the design firm where he had been working and joined Emma's business as a partner, bringing complementary skills and a client base that doubled their revenue within a year. Their professional partnership strengthened their personal relationship, and they moved in together in an apartment that felt more like home to Emma than anywhere she had ever lived. 1 year after receiving the mysterious letter, Emma reflected on the dramatic changes that had occurred in her life. She had transformed from unemployed and depressed to professionally successful and personally fulfilled. She was in a relationship that challenged and supported her in ways she hadn't known were possible. Her mother's health was stable, and their relationship had deepened through the crisis they had navigated together. But Emma still had no explanation for how she had received such accurate guidance about her future, or whether the letter had actually come from a future version of herself. The predictions had proven accurate in every detail that could be verified, but the mechanism behind the predictions remained completely mysterious. Emma considered a possibility that the letter represented some form of psychological projection, that her unconscious mind had recognized patterns and possibilities that her conscious mind had been unable to perceive, and had somehow manifested this recognition as an external message. She also considered the possibility that someone who knew her very well had engineered an elaborate intervention designed to help her make better life decisions. But neither of these explanations fully accounted for specific details the letter had contained, particularly the prediction about her mother's medical diagnosis and the precise timing of events that had unfolded exactly as described. 2 years after receiving the letter, Emma and David were married in a small ceremony attended by family and close friends. Emma's mother, now cancer-free, walked her daughter down the aisle, and Emma couldn't help but think about how different this day might have been if she hadn't received the mysterious warning about her mother's health. The wedding matched details from the letter exactly. The location, the season, even the song Emma chose for her first dance with David. But these choices felt authentic rather than predetermined, as if the letter had somehow guided her toward decisions that reflected her genuine preferences rather than imposed arbitrary requirements. 3 years after the wedding, Emma gave birth to a daughter she and David named Sophia, exactly as the letter had predicted. 2 years later, their son Marcus was born, completing the family that the letter had described in detail. If you made it all the way here, it means this story truly held you. So don't leave without showing some love. Hit like, subscribe to stay with us, and drop a comment. I'll be here, reading every word you share. Emma sometimes wondered if she was living a predetermined life, or she had simply been guided toward choices that reflected her authentic desires and natural trajectory. The letter's predictions continued to prove accurate in ways that seemed to transcend coincidence, But Emma's life also felt genuinely fulfilling and freely chosen. 5 years after receiving the letter, Emma faced a moment that the letter had specifically prepared her for. According to her supposed future self, she would face a temptation in her late 30s to sell the design business she and David had built together, in response to an acquisition offer from a major corporation. The letter had warned that selling the business would provide immediate financial security, but would ultimately leave Emma feeling creatively unfulfilled and professionally regretful. Instead, the letter advised her to decline the acquisition offer and use the business as a platform for more ambitious creative projects that will provide greater long-term satisfaction. When the acquisition offer came exactly as predicted, Emma found herself prepared to evaluate it not just in terms of immediate financial benefit, but in terms of long-term creative and personal satisfaction. She and David decided to decline the offer and instead expand their business into new areas that aligned with their artistic interests and social values. The decision proved to be professionally and personally rewarding in ways that validated the letter's guidance once again. But Emma realized that she no longer needed the letter's specific predictions to make good decisions. The experience of following its guidance had taught her to trust her own intuitions and to prioritize authentic fulfillment over conventional markers of success. On March 15, 2040, 16 years after receiving the mysterious letter, Emma sat down at her desk to write a letter to her younger self. She was 45 years old, exactly the age her supposed future self had claimed to be when writing the original letter. Her life had unfolded exactly as the letter had predicted, and she finally understood what she needed to do to complete the circle. Emma wrote a letter describing the challenges her 29-year-old self was facing, providing specific guidance about the decisions she needed to make over the following weeks. She included intimate details about her younger self's life that only she could know, and she wrote in the confident, mature handwriting that years of professional success had developed. But as Emma addressed the envelope to her younger self's apartment on Maple Street, she realized that she had no memory of actually sending the original letter she had received 16 years earlier. She could remember receiving it, following its guidance, and living the life it had predicted, but she couldn't remember the moment of actually writing and mailing it. Emma mailed the letter anyway, trusting that whatever mechanism had allowed her to receive guidance from her future self would ensure that the letter reached its destination at exactly the right moment. She had learned that some mysteries couldn't be solved through rational analysis, but that didn't make them less real or less meaningful. The woman who had received a letter from her future self had discovered that the boundaries between past, present, and future were more permeable than she had ever imagined, and that sometimes the most important guidance comes from the parts of ourselves that understand our lives from perspectives we haven't yet developed. Emma's story became a testament to the possibility that human consciousness transcends the linear experience of time, and that the wisdom we need to make good decisions is sometimes available to us in ways that challenge conventional understanding of causation and possibility. Whether through time travel, psychological projection, or some other mechanism, Emma had received exactly the guidance she needed at exactly the moment when she was most prepared to use it constructively. The letter had not only changed her life, it had taught her to trust the deeper wisdom that exists within human experience, even when that wisdom manifests in ways that seem impossible to understand or explain.